Okay. There we go.
That's how you do it.
Thank you. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Coach U podcast. I'm honored today to be joined by Justin Kavanaugh. I call him Coach Cav, but I want him to introduce himself. So, Coach Cav, welcome to the show and introduce yourself to the audience.
Man, it's great to be on. We've been trying to do this for a long time, and it's been fun ever since I came back from Tokyo. I told you, I was like, hey, man, let me get some energy so I could just show up fully present. So I'm excited to be here. You know, for those that in your audience that aren't aware of me, I do go by Coach Cav just because it's a really easy, it's coach, right? At the end of the day, that's my role. And I think people on this podcast could understand, you know, what your roles are. It's just a small piece of the puzzle with athletes and people. And over the years, it's just, it's been fun. You know, born and raised in Miami, you know, started my athletic career, had a lot of success, at least for me, right? I think everyone's like, oh, well, what success did you get to? I'm like, well, I'm sufficient enough for me to be happy with my athletic career. And, you know, started coaching early. I got forced into the coaching world. A long story short, you know, one of my friends, and we would all train together and work out together, got screwed by his agent and his manager, found out that somebody was, you know, stealing money from him. And he's like, Cav, you're training me. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I trust you. And I go, man, all right. That's when I realized, like, as a coach, like, really at the end of the day, it's not what you know. It's not even who you know. It's that who trusts you. And that's basically how my career started. So I had to, I wouldn't say fake it till you make it, but I had to do the best I can with not having a lot of experience and background when I first got thrown into it. And that's really what started my journey. And I realized, like, okay, don't screw this up. Like, at the end of the day, that was the position I was in from the day one. It was a don't screw it up position versus it being, you know, oh, make the most of this opportunity. It was like, oh crap, people are relying on me because they trust me, not because they know I'm good at what I do, because I haven't started this yet. And I think a lot of young coaches, they try to be somebody else. They don't know why they get into it. And for me, it was like I was forced into it. And I was still playing at the time. This is even before my career ended or got cut short. And, you know, now fast track, you know, August 2021, this is 20 years later. So that's pretty fascinating to think about when you look at a business crazy. And you're like, hey, this is 20 years. And I think I'm a baby in the industry as a coach. In a professional world, I think I'm a baby. And I'm around people that I highly respect on a regular basis that have done way, way more than me. And I just find myself to be in a very fortunate situation where I enjoy what I do.
It's amazing. And, you know, along that journey, you've made connections, you've networked, you've met other coaches. I definitely want to hear about some of those. I just want to know how you have built that trust. How do you build trust with other coaches, with people like-minded, to surround yourself with that kind of energy all the time?
Well, I think it really starts with intent, right? Like, your intent matters. And oftentimes most people's intentions are very hidden, and then on like deeper layers they become selfish and malicious. And as sad as it is, like, I think coaching is a very selfish profession because it's very fulfilling, right? If you think about it, if I told you, like, hey, you could go to work every day, and when you do your best, you feel amazing, and so much so that you're so rewarded that it doesn't matter what the outcome is for anyone else, that you are getting a huge prize at the end of the day. People would be like, sign me up for that job. And that's really what coaching is. But in order to get that, you have to pour yourself into other people. You have to really just kind of like, just say, hey, I'm here to serve, and understand that you're not first. And by doing that, you get so fulfilled. And I find that to be a very selfish approach, but there's nothing wrong with it. I think people say, like, oh, that's selfish. Like, yeah, it is. But the more I fill myself and take care of my cup, the more I could give to others. And then it just kind of just turns. And I find that to be very validating in regarding what and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think it first starts with intention. And then the second thing is, like, your actions have to back up those intentions. And if your actions are not aligned with your ambitions and what you're talking about and what you're doing, then at some point people are like, hey, I have a buffer for mistakes. I have a buffer for maturity. I have a buffer for development, but I don't have a buffer for trust. I don't have a buffer for intentions being malicious. And I think that's where you look at relationships over the years, and you'll have relationships with people that you might not even connect with day to day, but it's like nothing's like you don't skip a beat when you see them, even if it's years difference in regarding like those connection points.
Sure.
And it's the same things with athletics. It's the same thing with sports. When you're with somebody, even if you weren't with them every step of the way, there's a point to it where like if you truly trust them and the intentions are there and they just know you, those relationships could grow so fast because they understand like where you are with them within that dynamic. And I think oftentimes people walk on eggshells around other people, and they get so hesitant to how they show up. They get so hesitant to how they want to be perceived that they start guessing what that person wants. And the easiest way to do that, the easiest way to lose trust is to start thinking that you know better than that other person for what they need.
Yeah.
So you could just ask them, like, hey, no, literally, like, what do you really want? Let's get down to things, and let's stop living on the surface, and let's start working deeper. And when the deeper we go, the better it's going to be.
That's the surface stuff. When you said that immediately, because you're saying, well, what's the why? But people don't want to ask the why. I think people are afraid to ask questions. I also think communication has become lesser than it used to be, and people don't really know how to communicate. I think that's a big issue.
Because communication has become a parade. It's become a spectacle. People are like, well, let's teach you how to communicate so we could literally just beat around the bush for an hour and make our presentation look beautiful. But at the end of the day, you said nothing. The majority of our communication, everyone's like, it's all verbal. That's not true at all. The majority of your communication is actually visual and kinesthetic. But yet, everybody wants to believe that if you are phonetically correct or that you learn to communicate eloquently with your words, people are going to understand you. Like, I've been in a room with somebody that doesn't even speak the same language, and the majority of the time at high level athletics, you're around people around different cultures, and things mean different things. And what's interesting is when you don't let language or a particular culture be the hindrance for your development, then what you find is you can move fast, right? Whereas a lot of people, like, if you think about it, right, there's a lot of judgment around people that don't speak the same language as you, whether it be English and Spanish or Portuguese or Russian or Chinese or Japanese, whatever it may be. If you speak to somebody in a different language, there's certain cultures that automatically think that you're dumb. And I grew up in a house that had multiple languages, and in the house that I'm in now, my wife, she speaks many languages. And if I spoke in her language, if I was forced to speak in Russian, I would look and sound very dumb. So when you're communicating with somebody in a language that they don't understand, that doesn't mean they're dumb. It just means that you're not communicating well because they're speaking a different language.
How do you speak the same language? How do you get on that same language wavelength?
Number one, and this is where everyone's going to think that I'm like, oh, Mr. Tough Guy, and oh, I would never expect this from you. It's actually energy. It's being in a room with people that are very synergistic, and they have resonating frequencies. So this is going to go over a lot of people's head, but you've ever been around somebody that just drains you?
Oh yeah.
We've all been there.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Have you ever been around somebody and you're just like, I don't know what it is, but like I like them. And again, it might not be a physical attraction thing. It might be not an intellectual attraction thing. It might not even be an intimacy thing. It's just a matter of like, I could spend time with you because for some reason we are on the same frequency. Our resonating frequencies connect, and it's just good to be around them. And if you realize that, this is where I think it starts, but it actually is the deepest portion of it as well. And the hard part is like, how do you evaluate that? How do you quantify that? And I think that's completely individual. So you have to be protective of your energy at all times. And just like when we talked, I did not want to do this podcast with you for a long time. And I was very hesitant to tell you yes, not because I didn't want to do it. It's because the environment in which I was in was not going to be conducive for me to be 100% present with you. right? And I was not cool with that. Whereas if it was a media obligation, if it was just another podcast with somebody that I could just show up and give my expertise, that's fine. But I just didn't want to be in a negative frequency being around you and then be like, oh, that was a good content, but unfortunately something wasn't there.
Yep.
And I didn't want to do that. Like, that's just not the relationship you and I have. So I was like, hey man, as a friend, I'm going to have to like even put you on the back burner because it's more important to me than doing it now. And I think that's where it starts. It's like this very comfort level of honesty allows you to know, like, if I said that to you and then you are like, man, Cav's a dick, then maybe you know that we're just not there. But if you realize like, hey, you know what, there's something going on that's actually in our best interest, I should trust that process, then it's good. And now I could kind of devote as much time as you want, and I could be completely present, and I could be in a very positive, expression of myself without having anything else around me that's bothering me. Even though life is going to go on and things are going to come up, but I think you have to be protective of your energy. So I think first and foremost, it starts with energy, and then it comes down to styles. Like it actually is like so different than what they teach you in courses or in a book or in any other programs. They're all like, it's all about the words you use and putting people in different buckets. And I really do not agree with that. And I think this is going to probably ruffle some feathers for other people. And I am very comfortable doing that. See, where communication goes wrong, in my opinion, is that they're uncomfortable being authentic. And when you're uncomfortable being authentic, then you start to embody something that is not genuinely who you are. And then it just becomes you're digging a ditch, and it just gets really, really deep over time. So for me, I'm pretty comfortable, showing up with a lot of things that I might not be great at and just exposing them and being like, hey, like, it's a rap battle. Right? Here's the worst thing that I've done, or here's the things that are bad about me. Here's the insecurities I have. Good luck making more fun of them, because I got my family and the people that are the closest to me that are highlighting that on a regular basis. A stranger's not going to piss me off if the people closest to me bring that up. But if you bring people around you, whether it be your family, whether it be your business, whether it be the people that like motivate you or bring you around you, right, are protecting you from yourself by saying, hey, oh, you're great at this, but in reality you suck at it, then all of a sudden you start to embody this or inauthentic individual. And then you start to just get worse, and it steamrolls into something that at some point you're not going to like. So you ask, like, how do you build trust? How do you get on the same page? How do you speak the same language? I think it first knows, like, well, what are your communication styles? So, like, energy, number one. I think number two, it's stylistic. Because I just left Japan for the Olympics, and one of the interesting things about their culture is they do not let language become a hindrance. They will communicate with their hands. They don't judge you because you're speaking a different language. They literally are saying, there's a particular thing that is trying to be communicated, and I don't speak the language. So what other ways are there for us to actually get the outcome that we want? And they will use their hands. They will use a translator. They will use pictures. They will literally then, at the last part, they will literally take you to the place so that there's no confusion. And that comes from like a deep-centered service, like deep down in their core of working with people. It's a level of service, and it's the guest or the customer becomes first, and that's coaching, right? So they don't let your communication or your language hinder our communication. And I think that's fascinating. So I think first and foremost is energy. Second is stylistically. And then third is when you choose which style you use, right? It's trying to be as clear as possible.
It's hard for people to
and
be
not
clear.
having not bringing an attitude with it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to so you can't bring an attitude to the communication, because then that creates resistance to them.
You have to be aware of that attitude, though, because I think a lot of that's unconscious. You bring that to the table without knowing, and it dictates how you communicate. It dictates your energy that you put out, and like you said, the inauthentic self. I can relate to that big time.
Not only not only does you have to protect. Not only do you have to protect the way you show up, but you have to understand that not everyone's going to show up like in their best version all the time. So what ends up happening is you then react. And it's if you don't protect you, then you're going to then jump into their game. And their game often is going to be a game of negativity, a game of non-resonated frequency, a game of not fitting of the right style. And what ends up happening is then now I'm negatively reacting to their attitude or their expression, right? And you see this in all different cultures around the world, or even in the U.S. There's different environments when you go to them, you're like, oh, they're just like their hospitality is different. So when we do, we have a mastermind event for coaches, and in the coaches room, I kind of take people. We used to pre this last couple of years. We used to go to some of the finest hotels in the U.S. And I used to go. I'm in the Northern Virginia area, so right next to Washington D.C. So we used to stay at the Ritz-Carlton when we do our events. Which, if anyone's been to the Ritz-Carlton, it is incredible treatment. I mean, if anything goes wrong, they're going to take care of it. It's unbelievable level of service. When we go to Vegas, and we do it at the Aria Hotel. So it's a beautiful spot. It's an incredible experience. We took everyone to like the UFC gym. When we go down to like Miami or Fort Lauderdale, we do it at the W. So the levels of service are just amazing. Some people in certain cultures or in certain companies or certain environments or certain industries are just not used to getting treated that way. They don't even know that's normal. And then there's a group of people that are like, you're very, very wealthy, you're first class people that are just, that's the only way they know. They only know when people treat us a certain way. So anyone they don't treat you that way, they're just like, what's going on? And that doesn't mean some people are nice or not nice. Like doesn't matter what class of people you're in. Economically, there's all good and there's all people that are rude and not. But when you start talking about service-wise, you could go to those places and then experience what great customer service is. And I grew up in an environment that we just didn't know. Like I grew up in Miami, and we just didn't do like super high level vacations as a family. It's just my mom's a teacher, dad's a firefighter. That wasn't something that we had available to us. But over the years, when you start going to nicer environments and you're going like, wow, I feel amazing by the way they're treating me, and I don't even think I deserve this. And then you realize like, wow, that actually cost them $0. It was an effort and an attitude side of things. So you're going to these places, and you're thinking that it's for the wealthy, or you're thinking it's for the elite. But in reality, the only difference that they showed up with was with a good attitude. And you're like, well, I could do that to somebody else and make their day better by just being nicer. That's amazing. And it's completely contrary to what people think when they're around me, because my nature is to be extremely like blunt, direct, straight to the point, probably not nice. But I actually like being catered to when I go to other places. And I think part of that is context, right? Part of that is coaching environments. How do I get the most out of people? What am I trying to get towards as fast as possible? So I think there's always context that's needed, but this is a good example of when you go to different levels of hotels, you will see different experiences. So what I did is I took a bunch of gym owners to those experiences, and they're just like, wow, like I could go take that back to my gym membership for free. And then they invest that into their staff, and they're just like, the results are unbelievable. They could manage a higher ticket, and then they have a buffer. You imagine if you go to an environment and everything is just pristine, nothing's wrong, and then there's one mishap. You have now a little bit of a buffer with that customer. But if everything's a pain in the neck and it's hard to deal with, you're going to start to create environments that you just don't want to deal with. And then you don't have the buffer anymore. So instead of walking on eggshells, try to build your buffer in life with people. And that's the way I would look at it.
I picked this up from my ex, the shit shield. Like, you just put up your shit shield and don't let anyone else's shit get on you. And I love that, because it's like you're staying within that positivity mindset, staying away from the distractions that take your energy. And I actually want to talk to you about that more, because I didn't know you were going to talk about energy, and now I want to talk about energy, because I think it's such a it's an important thing to talk about, but people don't like necessarily believe in it because you can't see it, but you can. If you enter the world with more positivity, you change those mindset, those thoughts, you flip the script, you can change your whole life. But I want to hear your perspective on that.
So when we first started, at least when I first started my journey on learning about energy, right, it came from a doctor, Irina Korsovskaya, and she was a famous eye surgeon in Russia, and then was a part of the development of different technologies for the race for space, so to keep the cosmonauts healthy when they were in space. And she developed a technology. She worked with another doctor, Alexander Karasev, who developed a technology called Scanner, right? And she developed a device that was using scanner technology, which is about self-healing. And that device is called the DOVE, and it stands for Device Organizing Vital Energy. And what it does is it helps the body heal itself. So one of the things that I thought was fascinating was that our body has the ability to pretty much heal itself at the most extreme levels, whether it becomes cancer to a cut, to an injury, to anything that goes, that's just bothering you. And what I thought was fascinating is they're like, if it's energy, like how do you gauge it? Like how do you like truly test that? And the truth is you can actually, there's scientific tools and technologies that actually could test energy in the room. And you've seen infrared lights, you've seen scans of rooms where it's like heat transfer and what happens. And you could go into different environments and you see like frequencies, right? So like where I am right now, if you can see this TV, like there's a TV there, right? There's a frequency that comes off that TV, even if it's not on, right? There's a grounding effect of, people talk about like earthing or grounding, right? Like when you put your feet in the soil, when you're on grass, right? When you're in salt water, right? There's a negative ion charge. These all are, like, if you think about it, all of these things are real. It's not fake, it's actually real.
Because I was in Hawaii in May,
yeah,
and I went to the black sand beaches, and the second I picked up the black sand, there was just something so energetic about it, and I could feel it. And
and there's certain minerals that are actually hot, and there's certain minerals that are actually cold. And if you think about like rock, right, the cleanest water from nature comes from rock islands. So they come from volcanic islands, they come from rock islands, because what's happening is not only is there good minerals in the water, but it's filtering and all the bad stuff out, and it's pulling it out. So if you think about that, it's like everything has its purpose. Nature has its purpose. We are the people that screw it all up. And it's the same thing in coaching. It's like the athlete has their purpose, and what happens is now there's a political game like played with that athlete because of what they want to accomplish from a coach or from a parent or from the dynamic of the program, instead of saying athlete first. And if you go athlete centric and everything's revolved around the athlete, then all of a sudden you become a deterrent for all of the negative things or people that have agendas with that environment. They won't be around you. So if you come into my environment, what's interesting is people are like very selfish. They're here for a purpose. But what's also really fascinating is that there's a level of respect across the board, because they know whatever that person's trying to achieve is the most important thing to them. And that's what's interesting, because you have people that are Olympians, you have people that are pro athletes at the MLB, the soccer, football, something that we're really prominent in, fighting, whatever those games are. And then you have people that are CEOs of companies, and they're just like, I run a Fortune 500 company, and they're trying to be the health leader of their business. And then I have a person that's a dad or a mom, and they're trying to be the health leader of their family. And there's this immediate kind of like connection with everyone else's goals, even though that's not necessarily what their goal is. So you could look at that, and that's energy of the room. So you touched on like just going to Hawaii and being in. By the way, black sand beaches is like on my bucket list. I was a part of the St. Kitts and Nevis Olympic team, and they have one side of the island is like their white sand, and the other side is black sand. And there's like and what's fascinating is like when kids get sick. I grew up in Miami. When kids get sick, You go to the beach,
Yep.
right? And it's like, that's what you do. You try to, like, and it depends, right? Depending on what you're dealing with. But these are things that we know to be true. Why do we wear a cotton shirt? Well, because certain materials don't breathe. There's certain things that you just want to take off you, and then there's certain things you can just leave that on all day long. Bamboo shirts became super popular. Well, bamboo, and organic cotton have a great frequency, and they just feel good on you. They're very breathable, and your body just it doesn't say just take it out of me. It's like saying, hey, I want to stay in there. That's why bamboo sheets are so popular. It's like, hey, I want to be in them. Yeah. Silk is super popular because it's a natural material. So what happens is when it's an unresonating frequency, when there's some sort of negative connection where it's not where they just don't jive, the body wants to get over it quickly. So it's the same thing with people. When you go into a room, right, and you're just like, it's just the wrong feel. I don't want to be around there. So if you took one of these testers or monitors to test frequencies, and you scanned your house, think about the places in your house that have all of these electronics or frequencies, and then probably go by the window and you go, wow, that's amazing. It's a very positive environment. And then you wonder why a plant wants to live there. You wonder why your dog wants to go to a certain part of the house. You wonder why you don't feel good in certain environments. So now it's 2021. Technology is inevitable. We're not going to make our life worse because we're going to go away from technology. But we should have that same awareness of nature to protect ourselves from those things. When we walk into our building, I had a friend of mine that runs a huge essential oil company, and they basically helped me set up different areas of our office space to make the environment smell better for the emotion that we want to elicit in those rooms.
That's cool. I like that.
And what happened was even if you're in a bad mood, right? Or let's say you walk into the bathroom and you feel dirty, right? The number one reason why people cancel gym memberships are dirty bathrooms. It's the number one reason why people cancel gym membership. It ain't because they don't use them.
Not surprised me.
And because people don't use them for years, and then all of a sudden they show up and then it's a dirty bathroom, and they're like, all right, I want to cancel my membership. So if you feel ucky, but yet you walk into a bathroom and it's like eucalyptus and lime, you're like, oh, wow, this place feels clean. And all you have to do is smell it. So we would set up environments that are relaxing, environments that are exciting, environments that feel clean. And what ends up happening is you could change someone's state just by their smell. It's also one of the easiest ways to bring back a memory. We know that your scent has the longest lasting connection to your memory. Right? You might be able to see something, you might be able to hear something, but if you smell something, it can bring it back to when you're 5 years old. And how can we try to elicit those same responses that we're trying to create in environments with just using smell, but artificially creating them? And that's the way I look at it. It's I want to artificially give everyone a head start. If I could give anybody in communication a head start, right? So, thinking about it like this is, if we're playing baseball, a lot of people, they're on deck, right? And then there's anxiety as they build up from being in the dugout to being on hole, being on deck, then getting into the batter's box. And that's exactly what clients are like with their goals, is they have anxiety before they even get a chance. And what you could do is you could create environments, whether it be having better energy, better lighting, more comfort in the communication, to where they could just start on first base. You could say, hey, you don't even need to worry about this. I got you as a coach. Let me just take you to first base. You could start from here being with us. That's the way I look at it. And that there's so many factors in that equation, and they're all individual. And that's why if you have an individualized program, you could literally take somebody and say, hey, this is what you need now. And in 6 months, you might need something different. Hopefully that's the case. But you're allowing them to start on first base versus forcing them to go through the buildup and anxiety to get on deck. And then once they're on deck, then there's a lot of anxiety because they go, oh, I'm next. It's just like when you're in a room and the person goes, here, introduce yourself. And then as you get going down the line, you know that it's getting closer to you. And as it's getting closer to you, your anxiety builds up. or your adrenaline builds up, whatever that is. Even if you're super charismatic, you still have those feelings.
Yep.
So how can we try to not suppress them, but make it easier for the next person that doesn't have those, that has different fears than we do?
That's an interesting thing
in
too,
our
because
environments. That's all we're trying to do.
everyone's having their own experience. And as you talk to me about how it is in your gym with the CEOs and the baseball players, the football players, the all the professional athletes, to go as one of those people, let's say I'm walking in, like to see another person's experiments, to see and validate like they are also trying to do their best, and that pushes them to do their best, instead of it being a competition. Not that it can't be competitive, but more so to let the competition or the ego take over and say like, well, now I can't be happy for somebody else or get joy from somebody else doing the best they can because I can't do that for myself, or whatever the case may be.
So you're going to have, as a coach listening to this, for any coaches listening to this, this is a thing that even I struggle with, and I want to share this with everybody because I will tell you exactly what Coach is talking about and how you could probably identify it quicker in your business. If you've ever had a situation where an athlete goes, well, why am I not doing that? Or why am I not using that tool? Or why am I not, I want to do this workout. That's their ego talking because they're watching someone else do it and they think that that's their advantage. But if you have a really, really good athlete to coach relationship and they see an athlete doing something different and they don't even say a thing, it's because they know deep down in their heart that coach has my back, and if I needed to be doing that, I would. It's a very hard place to get. But if you ever want to know like when there's insecurities being built up, it's when the ego shines.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Well said. I want to keep going with this stuff, and we'll get back to the biomechanics because I definitely want to get, which I honestly feel like is going to be like that for you. I think this is the real deal stuff. Because look, man, my podcast started out as interviewing people and wanting to teach people from other people's experiences. Wasn't sure what if it was going to start in the training world or whatever, but I knew I wanted to talk to everybody. Now I know I just want to teach people. So dark times are going to come, and it's important to be able to stay alive in these times and stay positive in these times. How do you go about that? How do you make sure that the positivity, the focus stays on point? Because distractions are, as you said, technology. We love it, but it's causing so many people to lose focus. That's one factor. But how do you stay focused? How do you stay driven? How do you stay positive in the darker times?
So, and I think we've all been there. I also think that one of the most difficult things when people are in dark times is judgment, right? And self-judgment, right? They start to say, oh, this is the worst. You don't understand. And the truth of the matter is I have no idea what you're going through. Because it's so individual. I could be in the exact place at the same age, in the same environment, have the same injury or the same mental issue or the same frustration that's going on. But it's different because you see things from a different perspective. You can't walk in someone else's shoes, so don't try to. You can borrow their perspective for a little bit, and that's what you're doing with teaching the world through other people's wisdom or experiences. So if there's a lesson that I'd like to teach people in my family, primarily, my son, I have a 4-year-old, and it's like, what do I want to instill? Like, obviously family values, things that we care about. But at the end of the day, he's going to be his own man one day, and he's going to see things from, me and mom and from others that he likes and doesn't like, and he's going to make choices. But there's some things I want to instill in him that are important, and this primarily is what you're referring to, and I think it's a good place to go for all coaches and for all athletes, because as a coach, your job is to really help people get from point A to point B, and if you've never been there, then you're looking for the map and you're trying to decide, and you're getting distracted by so many things as you're on the way too. Or if you've been exactly where those people are, you know how to get that person from point A to point B, but you have your other journey, and now it's like you're not in a good place to bring them to that right? So like the idea of a coach carriage is what it's called, right? It's basically a carriage, and it's a coach truck, and it takes a luggage from point A to point B, or people from point A to point B. But sometimes that coach, that wheel's broken. Sometimes that hitch isn't where it needs to be. Sometimes that axle is not aligned. And it's a harder journey for the things that are on the wagon, right? On the coach. Because the coach itself is not fully equipped to handle that journey. So you have to take care of yourself, first and foremost. The stronger you are as a coach, the more likely you're going to be able to take larger loads from point A to point B. I think oftentimes that's forgot about because you're so trying to give. You're just so much trying to pour into other people. But back to that point, I think what I would want to make sure that I instill into my son is, number one, no matter what happens in life, don't panic. Because when you panic or you create anxiety, you're now creating another problem. So you have this first problem that you're dealing with, and when you panic, you've now created an artificial problem. And now you have to deal with two. You have to deal with the actual initial real problem that's in front of you, and the fake problem that you created that is not real, that is becoming real, and the more you panic, it becomes real. And now you have to deal with these two, right? And we all know it's kind of hard to catch two rabbits at the same time. So, number one, don't panic. Number two, deep down, you need to know that there is a way. Because if you don't, you will automatically default to quitting. You'll default to stopping. You'll default to excuses. So first and foremost, do not panic. Second, know that there is a way. Because if you think about it, you could be in the worst of times. And if you thought, hey, there's no way, and you just stopped, the movie ends. But if you think about every movie we've ever watched, the movie only gets good when there's literally no way out and they find a way. Does that make sense?
Totally makes
sense. The movie,
Totally.
The book, the story, the adventure has only gotten good when you realize as an audience member backing up going, I don't even know how they're going to get out of this. I don't know how they're going to save the world. I don't know how they're going to get the girl. I don't know how they're going to survive. And then bang, there's something that happens. And it's that deep-rooted belief that there is a way. And the last thing is just move. You got to tie all of these three things together. So the first one is don't panic. The second one is to know deep down in your heart that there is a way. So that you don't quit, you don't make excuses, you don't point fingers, you don't blame, you don't get into the world that we're in right now where it's always someone else's fault. And again, it's not even a political thing, but it's left's fault, it's the right's fault, it's red, it's blue, it's this person, that person. There's no ownership or accountability in anything that we do. And then the last thing is move. You're not going to find a way out in the same place that's where you're stuck. The only way you're going to find a way out is if you start moving and then opportunities present themselves. Yep. So, writer's block is something that I think is fascinating because it's like you just lose energy. The reason why you have writer's block is because you stop experiencing things in the world. I have writer's block. So I'm going to go to a cabin and I'm going to lock myself into a room and I'm just going to put my head down and write on a keyboard. But you didn't experience anything new.
Right.
But if you went outside the cabin where the mountains are, where the water is, and then you started to let things pass you and started to see things and experience things, ideas are going to trigger. The best artists, the best authors, the best people that are teachers experience a vast variety of things and then take that back and teach that to others. That's what happens. My best coaching moment or best coaching experience is at the Dali museum. I went there. It was fascinating. I was like, there's nothing better than this. I love the museum. It's phenomenal. And then I go, okay, well, Dali's mentor was Picasso. So I want to go actually I want to go there. And then that became my best coaching experience of all times. It was going to the Picasso Museum and seeing what was there and looking at the relationships that he had with himself and with others. And that's just fascinating. But if I would have never experienced that, I would have nothing to talk about. I would just be speaking at this kind of like this abstract view. And you can't really, I don't think that you could get to an abstract view until you've done what Dali did or what Picasso did, is they mastered every single aspect of art. If you look at early works of Picasso, early works of Dali or any high-level artist, pointillism, imagery, anything like that, geometric shapes, whatever it may be, they are masters of those individual styles. And then they created their own. But they couldn't create their own until they mastered the other stuff. I mean, Dali could draw a perfect circle pretty much at all times from anywhere and make sure the light is perfect. But if you look at his artwork, you would never think that's the case. You'd be like, that's all over the place. But what's fascinating is there's elements of perfection that he's molded into his own style. But you can't do that unless you're fundamentally sound.
Right.
So I think that you need to experience things so that you could always, you could find new things. And that's why it's like, number one, don't panic. Number two, know deep down in your heart there is a way. And number three, move. And then you'll start to develop this level of confidence that no matter what happens, I know I'm going to get myself out of it.
You have to take action. Like you're saying, you have to make the moves.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because taking the action can be scary because it can seem overwhelming at times how much, you want to accomplish or what you have set out for yourself, or, hey, you just got a bunch of athletes came in, you got a program for them, you got to assess, whatever. But without taking that action, there's no way that you can learn, because you're going to have, I think the biggest thing that I learned over the past year is taking the action, and it's okay to not know what you're doing, but it's even more important to learn from what you did do. And having that moment of realization is like, just go. I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm making a podcast. I'm having fun doing it. It doesn't matter. But what I am doing is doing. And then from there, you learn and grow.
And what happens is if you start to reflect on the actions that you have, immediately you're getting better. Immediately. So, one of those things, you're never going to get better by thinking about the same thing all the time. You're going to get better by doing the same thing all the time, because it's actually going to evolve.
Yeah.
And that's like, people think that like it's counterintuitive, like, well, I'm always thinking about this. Well, like, have you done that? Because if you've done it, you'll realize like there's a better way. But sometimes you can't even see those things until it happens.
Right.
And I find it like a Rubik's cube,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
The first time you do it, it's just like fascinating. It's like, oh my God, I finally did it. It took you freaking months. And then you're like, there's like a 7-year-old that's just like, and he does it in 2 seconds. And it's because, like, well, he doesn't have this fear of it, number one, but he's also like, he just does it all day long. And then it's like, oh, there's 7 different ways I could get here.
Yep.
And then it's just like chess. It's like anything in life. The more you do it, the more opportunities you find to get to the same, destiny, and if not, a different direction.
I want you to define for me what your version of own, love, and be yourself is.
Own. So I would say, I'm going to flip this back. So we have this thing called like, what does it mean to be a pro? Because everyone's like, oh, Cav, you only work with pro athletes, you only work with pro Olympians and all these people. And I was like, yes, that's very true. Like if you see the work that I do, the majority of it's done at a high level. I get that. But what does it mean to be a pro? Have you ever thought about that? And for me, the P stands for passion. Whatever it is that you want to accomplish, you got to be excited and passionate about it, because there's going to be days where you don't want to do it. And if you're not excited about stuff, then you're not going to do a good job. The R is for, you got to be resilient, and you have to have this relentless pursuit of your passion. And through that process, you got to be resilient. There's going to be obstacles in your way, and you got to be able to push through it. And then the O stands for ownership, right? So coming back to what you had asked is ownership. At the end of the day, it is not anyone else's race. It's yours. So you have to take ownership in that process. And to me, if you do those things, if you're passionate about something, if you're resilient towards that same, those actions that you're going to take, and you're going to make sure that you work through it and you're persistent with it, and you take ownership, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. You take ownership. You're a pro in my book. I don't care what it is. You're a professional. And maybe you get paid a little or you get paid a lot, but at the end of the day, you are a pro, and you should and you deserve to be treated like a pro. So that's what that means. And a lot of it is like that last factor is ownership. If you don't take ownership in what you do, I don't think that you could say that you're a pro. Someone else is a pro for you. Really what it comes down to is the people that are closest to you, right, are there to make you better. They're not there to protect you from this version that you want to be. So for instance, to the world, right? So we're on this podcast. If my parents, if my wife, if my athletes, if my coaches that I support, or people in our mastermind group listen to this podcast and go, man, that's just not Cav. That's Coach Cav. That's not you. You know, you showed up and you know, you talked all this big game and you talked all this. That's not what it's like at all at your events. That's not what it's like coaching, working with you. That's not what it's like being one of your athletes. That would just detract them. They would just move away from me. And they wouldn't say anything, actually. They wouldn't be like, oh, I'm calling you out. They would just move away. The people that are closest to you, right? Like your wife, your significant other, your super close friends, they should call you out. They'll tell you, hey, yeah, that's not what it's about. Like I just like what you did there, it's not cool, right? It's this idea of you walk into an environment and there's a person that has something on their teeth, like, are you going to tell them? It's really uncomfortable for both parties. Nobody wants to have that on them, and nobody wants to say, hey, you know. But, you know, where do you want to be? Do you want to be in an environment where you are constantly just always worried about yourself? Or do you want to serve other people? Because when you serve other people, they will then make you better. But you can't serve other people if you're not okay with who you are, or at least not for a long time. So I think Be You is all about, you know, surrounding yourself with people that are going to make you better and not going to let you become something that's not authentic. Because you being authentic is as much about you being around people that are authentic.
Totally.
And we see it all the time online. We see it all the time in different environments where it's like there's these like groups of people that all they're there is to promote each other, but they're very superficial. But they go like wildfire. Like they take off. They have huge followings, and everybody that's a part of their group, whenever you get into these arguments, they all like jump on each other and like, oh, well, you're wrong because you're an idiot. Like, well, how about you're wrong because the facts say that you're wrong? And I would much prefer to be in an environment where people in my own group called me out and said, hey, let's make each other better, but let's not like try to hide the fact that we're not perfect. Like, we're not perfect. So don't try to pretend to be. So that's what that means to me, and that's how you develop your authentic self. And I found myself, like, as a coach, like, I need my own coaches, right? So I if I want to work with other people, I need to have people that keep me in check too. So I have people in my life that I look up to. You know, I'm meeting with somebody next week that has done so much for me in my career, and I'm like, hey man, it's been a long time, let's catch up, you know. And I go, I don't think that I'm at the place where I'm ready to meet with you again because I haven't progressed the rate in which I think you're going to be impressed with. And he goes, you have no idea. And he goes, just by you saying that, that's disappointing. We need to meet now.
Man.
So it's the opposite, right? Like, I'm waiting to where I've done something impressive to where I can meet back with these people so that I could show them how much we've grown. And he's like, no, that's the problem. The problem is you're so worried about what you think I'm ready for that you're not doing what you need to do. So we need to meet now so we can get you out of this crappy place. Because the place that you think you're in is in a crappy place. I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. Because I didn't think about it like that. I didn't think of it like that at all.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to for me, is like keeping the people around you so that you could, you know, really be comfortable. So you don't always have to like watch your back.
No, it's good. It's just yet another thing or another reason as to why we surround ourselves with people who want to uplift us because it's coming from an authentic place and they've already done that self work and they want to uplift you because they know you'll do the same thing back. But another way to get out of that negativity, out of that dark cloud, is surround yourself, communicate with people who will give you wisdom and will pick you up in moments of darkness.
Absolutely.
So love you. Tell me what you got.
I think when you talk about love, like it's interesting because I tell my athletes a lot I love them because there's something special to tell another grown man or a person that you're not necessarily intimate with, but there's somebody that you do care about, that you love them, because you want them to understand that love surpasses the lust for their success from the world, right? It's like there's these things that people love about people or athletes because of what they've done for them or that they won. And it's like sometimes you have to tell them, like, you did your best and that's what I love about you. It's not that I love you because you are a winner. You're a winner because you've done your best, and I love you because you have done your best, not because of what you've accomplished. People don't realize that. I think that that's it's a sad place when I see athletes and coaches and I see people and fans that are only attracted to winners because of how it makes them feel. And the process is the journey. That's the fun part, right? The cool part is the conversations before the race. It's the locker room part of it after the game. That's the fun part. And playing the game is this like flow state where we're almost not thinking about any of these other things. So we don't even want to be. We don't even want to attach ourselves to that, right? That's the way I look at it. And coming from a place of love is like understanding that it's not a worldly accomplishment or possession. It's something that's outside of that. And I think that's just hard for people to talk about because it's like, oh, it's super sentimental or it's very, very emotional. Like, well, it's supposed to be. Like, I want you to bring your emotions to the table. Like, that's where you get the most out of things. I mean, You've seen people do crazy things for love, good, bad, and indifferent. I think you have to be okay with the fact that you just let yourself go. Like, you're really vulnerable when you love somebody.
Absolutely.
You're very, very vulnerable.
It's a scary place.
You have to kind of take that shield down.
Yeah. We'll move the shield for certain things. We lift it back up for other.
Absolutely.
You just got back from Tokyo 2020, the Olympics, man. Like, that's so cool. Congratulations for being able to do that. And it was cool to see you out there and like having the experience of like being in different seminars with you and talking in different times. And it's just like, it's such a cool, surreal thing. So how was that? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, I'll first say that, like, Japan is an amazing, country, very fascinating from the technology and the people. It's definitely changed over the years. And being there in Tokyo was very different than what they said it was going to be. They basically said it was going to be the most hated Olympics. They said it was protest everywhere, and they weren't happy that we were there. Like, the people in Japan were some of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. They were the most caring. They were so happy to serve. They were so happy to have you there and just be, a part of it. And that made you feel welcomed. Like, if you ever go to a place where they just like we're so happy you're here, it feels good. It really does. And myself and the athletes were just very like happy with the fact that everybody wanted us there, and that's a good feeling. And I think if it weren't for the restrictions of people that were allowed to be there and the fans and all that stuff, it could have had been the best Olympics ever. It was unbelievable. The facilities, everything about it. Japanese culture is fascinating. Very different than me. Like, always on time. It's very, very structured. I think it's fascinating. But watching an athlete, Jason's journey and a number of the other athletes that were there from all different countries, I had a chance to be around and be a part of their journey as well as they built up for the games.
That's
but
beautiful.
watching Jason's journey and being a part of it like every single day, for the last couple of years, and in the preparation for the big day, we get there and it's just like, hey man, we're on a completely other side of the earth, and nothing's changed. Like, let's go. Like, let's just work. Let's put it in. Let's have fun. Let's embrace the moment. Let's take it in. Don't let it consume us, and just understand that we belong. And this was his third Olympic cycle, so wasn't his first rodeo. So we were not like overwhelmed with all the other stuff. And it was great. I mean, he went out there, and I think he did a great job. I mean, there's a lot of logistical things that we have to overcome, and because of the nature of him being from a small country, from the fact that, with everything that was going on with the restrictions, we didn't get to run on a track until, up until 2 weeks before his race, 5 days before the run, which for a track athlete is pretty hard to do. Like, you got to practice, on a regular. We go from being in the States, being on a track every day, to going out there, and we can't get on a track until 5 days before a race. So we didn't let any of those, hurdles stop us from our goal. We didn't let any of those things kind of hinder us from our progress. He did a great job. It was also interesting because this was the first time I've documented part of the journey, and like you said, being excited to see me share it. Jason asked me to do that. He's like, I'd love, he was actually mad that I didn't do more of it. I'm like, man, this is hard. Like, I'm editing videos. This is not what I'm good at all. I just want to like coach and do my job. But, I was over there like film crew and audio. It was pretty fun because it was out of my comfort zone. But that meant a lot to him. It meant a lot to, the people that supported us through this journey. And I think that's really cool for him to have an entire country behind him. He was the one male athlete from his country and his federation. And I think that's pretty cool to have an entire, nation around him that just wants to support, him do great work. And he's a great person, and it was super exciting to be a part of. And a lot of pride. I mean, really, really was a lot of pride to go into that. So I was excited. I appreciate you guys, yourself directly, but anyone that was just like in support of what was going on, because it's a lot of work that people just don't understand that went into this, and a lot of sacrifices to get there and to go out there and do what he did. I mean, he went in there ranked 117th and finished 6th in the semifinals.
It's crazy.
So that's a heck of a showing for somebody on the world stage, in those conditions, all thing being what it was. I think he did a great job, and I'm very proud of that. And there's nothing for him to be ashamed of. He did his best.
It's amazing. It's so cool. And like, so too, like what came through, at least from my perspective, the energy that he gave off is exactly like what you said. Is just, he seems like such a kind, lovely energy, and you guys had a great like chemistry too, which was even cooler to see.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great kid. I mean, I say he's a kid, but he's 30 years old. But I mean, he's got a 4-year-old daughter. He's got a family. He's a good person. He won't be around people if they're in bad energy. Like, he'll just leave the room. So I actually call people out. And he's like, why are you doing that? It's just a waste of the time because those people are just not worth it. I'm just like, I feel like I have an obligation to say that you're an asshole. And he's like, I just don't even want to be around them. So he'll just leave. But what's fascinating also is you talk about like his energy. He's very intuitive about like himself. He's very in touch with like his body, as you can imagine, right? A 3-time Olympian, the best at what he does. But we had a lot of fun doing it. Like opening ceremonies, I'm like, man, my shirt's wrinkled. My mom's gonna be really pissed to see me on national television with a shirt wrinkle. He's like, I'll iron your shirt, coach. I'm like, good. So I made him iron my shirt for opening ceremonies, and it's like,
oh, that's awesome.
Cool. I tell him, I was like, so we have, if you can see up here on the board, we have like a ping pong, like that's all our in-house competitions we have. So we play here at the apartment and at our office ping pong all the time, and
awesome.
He's beat me pretty bad over the course of this like Olympic training cycle. So I told him, I said, once we get out to Tokyo, I'm going to whoop your butt. And so we go out there and he beat me pretty good, but I skunked him on a game, and I was talking so much crap. And I said, my goal is that you go out there and perform your best. But right before that, when you do that interview, just let everybody know that Coach Cav beat you in ping pong that day. And that was the goal. It's like when you could have those relationships and you go like, you're not worried about, oh my gosh, like everything's not perfect, so therefore the athlete's not going to do their best. When you're not worried about that, you have this ability to just kind of enjoy the moment. The work is already done. Before we even went out there, the work was done.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of embracing the moment and just kind of making sure we polish the car before it goes out on the showroom. So we could enjoy it and we could seize that moment and we could really take it in because it was phenomenal. The people, the culture, the food, the experience, the venues, everything was amazing. It's unfortunate that, we couldn't share that more with the world. But there was no protest, like despite what you see on the news. I had people sending me messages saying, oh my God, there's a protest right outside your hotel before we got to the Olympic Village. I'm like, really? I walked right outside right to my window and I videotaped the 4 or 5 people that, are waving, jumping up and down, clapping, and being the nicest people in the world. But on the news, it was like protest. Like, oh, there's a bunch of attacks for opening ceremonies and protests. I'm like, I'm at opening ceremonies for 5 hours walking 10 miles exhausted, and there wasn't one protest. Everybody was so happy to see us. It was the nicest thing in the world. So don't be fooled by the media. Don't be fooled by everything that's on the news. If you really want to, enjoy life, just focus on you, and you'll be shocked on how much positive things you'll see. And negative will be attracted to negative, and you just let that be what it is. But the positive things will just, be around positive things.
So how did you and Jason meet?
So I was doing a project with Stronger Experts, and we were going to set up a live event. So we thought about this idea because what really takes a young coach and gives them the chance to accelerate their career? Is it knowledge? Is it certifications? Is it the degree? What is it? And it really is like, it's who they're around. Like if you can just take a young coach and you can say, I'm going to put you with a high level person early on in your career and you learn how to do these things, or you can now associate with that. Like this could be your moment. This could be your resume moment that takes you to another level. So we built this, Project Stronger Jamaica, where we would go down to Jamaica and take a few experts that have had a bunch of successful Olympic careers. I was one of them. Travis Mash was another one. Phil Tremblay was another one. And we go down there and we bring younger coaches. Some of them were already doctors, like Dr. Ryan Chow, who's already had a successful business. He's had a great career, but he wants to really kind of take it to another level, right? And we would take these coaches and we would go down to Jamaica and we would train younger kids in the process, but then work with some Olympians as well. And they get a chance to see what that's like and then develop from the ground floor. So then when they go back home, they have this Olympic experience. They know what it's like to work with people at this level. And so we did that. And during that process when we were down there, Johan Blake, who, in my opinion, is, the second greatest Olympian, on the track and field side, of all time. He was the second fastest man of all time, one of the most, decorated Olympians. And in my opinion, one of the most amazing humans on this planet that's at high level athletics. He was on the track and he was, talking to everybody and being very just willing to share. You're the best in the world at what you do. And at the time, Johan was the fastest man that was running because Bolt had retired. And frankly, if you actually think about the fastest, not time-wise, but actually speed-wise, Johan running that 200 when he broke the world record, that was the fastest human in history, like the speed he hit off the bend. So that it's just fascinating when you start thinking about like speed endurance, being somebody that was much taller. But Johan coming off the bend was the fastest of all time.
What was his time? Or is it speed?
19 something. I couldn't tell you exactly.
Very fast. Very fast.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a huge stats guy. I'm more of a visual coach. I don't do a lot of metrics. I let other sports scientists or people that do it, they'll track it for me and they're like, oh, that's fascinating. I'm like, oh, look good to me.
What do you measure?
What do I measure?
Yeah.
Ground contact time is important to me. Stride length is important to me, but primarily angles. Angles are the most important thing.
Okay. Oh, we'll get back to this. I want to get back to Jason real quick because I have so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
questions
cool.
about that.
So many questions about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. It's fun. So, anyways, we were out there on the track, and Johan was just being super open and giving to everybody else. And he asked me to do a favor for him. And when the fastest man in the world asks you to do a favor, and you're the speed guy, you do the favor, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, I don't really want to do it, but it's Johan Blake, so you do it. And he's like, take a look at this kid. So at the time, Jason was training down in Jamaica. He was with Coach Glenn Mills, and he had already bounced around from a few other coaches and camps because he had got hurt. And Jason was a year off at that point. He had not had a season where he had ran a race. And he literally couldn't run. If he did a warm-up, he was out for like a week. And it was tough. So I worked on him within 2 days. We got him running. And he felt good. So he decided to run in the Pan Am Games, which was down in Peru. So he flew up and worked with me for 10 days and in preparation. Now, he hasn't ran in a year. And we did a 10-day camp in preparation for the Pan Am Games.
God.
So he went from literally not being able to walk or jog to running full speed in 10 days. And he goes down to the Pan Am Games and made it to the finals. So he decided to say, hey, I'm going to pick up my bags and I'm going to move out with me and run and get in preparations for Tokyo 2020. And in preparation, on his way out here, he actually got sick right before the big pandemic hit. So he's like, oh man, so he missed his flight that day because he was not able to make it out here. And then the pandemic hit. So then he's stuck at home and he can't get outside and he can't train. So finally, in the midst of everything, we were able to get him out. So we're training back and forth, video calls, whatever, doing the best we can. But he can't even get on a track. There's only one track in St. Kitts, and you know they were in lockdown. You know, they were very strict compared to other countries. So anyways, we were finally able to get him out here through an exemption. I think 3 or 4 months before. So he came out in March of 2021, and basically spent every day prepping for Tokyo. So if you think about it, like, whereas a lot of people had 3 years to prep for Tokyo and an extra year, he had 3 months, and he goes out there and has a hell of a season. So, you know, we went from, you know, basically, you know, trying to recover, you know, rehab this kid to, you know, getting him ready for this season. And I would say in his, you know, 3 Olympic cycles, you know, 15-year high-level career, he had probably the best season he's ever had. I mean, he opened the season qualifying for the Olympics with 10:01. He came second behind Fred Curley when he broke the world lead. And then he was basically, you know, winning meets left and right and doing very well, and had a lot of success this season. And we were, you know, just testing things and working through stuff. And I think he still has a lot more tire on his treads on his tires. And he's going to make a run for Paris 2024. So that's fascinating. This will be his 4th Olympics as we head into it. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, one of the things that I learned with Jason is he's one of the most grateful athletes I've ever worked with. And Coach Bruce, who's my boxing coach, says gratitude is the shortest lived emotion. People are grateful for a short period and then they're done. And I was like, man, that's so true. And I would say, you know, Jason Rogers is probably the most grateful athlete I've ever had a chance to work with because he appreciates everything. And he says, he goes, I come from, I know what good is, I know what bad is, I know what poor is, I know what wealth is. And I don't think he really understands what wealth is, but he's seen differences of ways in which you could live. And he's just like, because of that, I appreciate everything. And that right there just makes you want to work with somebody. Because we didn't really have, 100%. We go out to Tokyo, and I'll tell you a funny story in the Olympics. So where all of these, athletes have everything catered to them. They have like 5 shoes. They have all the things that they need. They have all the gear. We get out there, and the shoes that they gave us were not the right ones.
Oh, jeez.
It's like we're dealing with a 3-time Olympic athlete, and we're about to compete at the world stage, and you're going to give us the wrong spikes. So I was not happy. He was like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to run great in him no matter what. He's just that type of guy. He's just super happy to have the right stuff. And I'm like, the only piece of equipment you need is spikes. You don't really need anything else. Like you could run in underwear. It doesn't matter to me. But you got to have the right shoes. So I'm like, these shoes you have they're great, but not for you. The way you hit the ground, you're going to break this spike plate. So there's a plate on the bottom of a spike. And the way Jason puts force into the ground, he is going to break these spikes. And Jason was adamant. He's like, you don't know nothing. We fight all the time, by the way. Any idea that you think that your relationship with your athletes is not supposed to be argumentative, you don't know coaching. So we fight and argue all the time. So we're at the Olympic Games, and the day he gets his spikes, he's telling me that he's going to run in them. And we haven't gotten on a track, so we can't get on the track until 5 days before our race. So we can't really test these things out. So day one, 5 days before his race, he gets on the track with the spikes that he likes, that I know he's not going to do well. And the first run out of the blocks, he breaks the plate. So now I'm in there like, I told you so. He doesn't tell me, but I see it. And he's just like, oh, I'm going to switch into my other ones. I'm like, yeah, right. I know what that means.
So good.
So I'm like, now I'm pissed because now I'm on a hunt for how do I get equipment. And now we're 4 days before race day in Tokyo. So I was able to meet Emma, and she basically saved our butt. And Nike came through and gave us a brand new pair just for Jason. And I'm like, ooh, shout out to Nike. My God, they were amazing. They took care of the athlete. So we get spikes for Jason 3 days before his race. First day he puts them on is the day before. And it was awesome. Man. But like, you imagine you go to the Olympic Games and you don't even have the right equipment. So all of these things, like, so many people don't understand like what it's like to come from a underdeveloped, poor country. Because we're so lucky. We take things for granted. And I think, working with athletes that come from different environments, they don't take things for granted. And it's really cool, like even circling back to Johan, Johan's at a place right now in his life where he has a lot more at his disposal than he did when he first got started. And this is a guy who's, like, he seizes the moment. And both of them are amazing people. But one of the things I think is fascinating is Johan's one of the greatest athletes of all time at the Olympic level. And I would say, I'm going to tell you this right now publicly, and people are going to think I'm crazy. The Olympics is probably going to be not even close to the most impactful thing he's ever going to do. Because he's building homes for kids that are like at abusive homes, like when they're younger. He's flying all around the world, like motivating and helping people. He's got a rehab clinic in Jamaica. He has helped, build so many environments to develop sports in younger kids so they could be in a positive environment. You would never know that he's gone through any adversity in his life because of how positive he is. And he goes, that's the reason why he is so positive, is because he doesn't want other people to go through what he went through. And like, those are the people you want to surround yourself with. Even me as a coach, I want to surround myself with those athletes. Like, imagine if you're a coach right now listening to this. Can you surround yourself with the athletes that you want, that give you energy, that want you to show up better so you could give them more? Those are the type of people I want to be around. So Jason, Johan, number of other athletes, but those are the people that make me show up better every day. Because if I'm not getting better, then I'm not actually living up to the way I ask them to get better every day. Why can't they if I don't show up better, then I don't think that I'm living, in alignment, right? And I think it's fascinating to see, people that have just done, like, Johan's been very smart with his brand, in my opinion, where he's used his brand, not selfishly, but for others. And I think that's what allows him to live the life he does, in the sense of like being comfort, like with who he is. Like, he knows who he is. I don't give a crap if the world doesn't know who he is. And I don't know if he does either. But I'll tell you what, as a coach, I want to be around a guy like that. And it's just an honor just to be in the same room with somebody like them. So, shout outs to a person like that, because that's more impressive than the athlete. And the athlete is, in my opinion, very impressive.
Totally agree, man. That's awesome. I'm gonna look more into him and see what he's doing. I like to learn more about that. So thanks for letting me know. For Jason, when you talked about how he strikes the ground, let's go more into a little sprint mechanics now. So what was Jason's biggest thing, or thing that you wanted to work on with him? Was the first thing you saw him? You assessed him, you saw him running. What did you see? And then what were the things throughout the training that you were like, okay, we're going to really work on this?
Yeah, so the first thing is he came to me with an injury, right? So you always want to kind of pull back the layers of the onion. And you got to figure out like what's not just like whatever you see, it's a delay from what's happening. So speed works so fast. So whenever you watch somebody, you're like, wow, that's what you see. But then it's happening from something that happened way before that because it's a secondary thing that you see. It's not the first thing that's happening. So his hip was causing a ton of problems and deep, deep pain in the hip. And it happened from the actual position that he held his hips in. So the issue that you run into is that technically his hips are in a poor position, but he needs strength and stability in order to handle the position. So it's not something that we could fix just through a technical adjustment. Yes, he needs to address his technique, but he needs to develop the strength to support that. So that's the first thing. So we know that, okay, wow, if you start to open up, you're going to have problems because you don't have the strength to support that speed right now. So we actually have to slow you down. The other aspect of it is his flexibility. He was super tight. And I think everyone's like, oh, well, you just do mobility or you don't no, we static stretch him for hours. Like when I first met Jason was probably, maybe stretching 20 minutes. I don't know. But now he was stretching 90 minutes in like a day. And, that's a shock to most people because they're like, oh, static stretching makes you slow. Well, not really, but everyone thinks that's the case. And I'm a big fan of flexibility, and I don't think that static stretching is going to make someone slow, but I also don't think that it's the only way to achieve the results that you want. So we've used many different modalities to get them there. So the first one is, making sure he has the adequate range of motion. Second thing is getting him in the right technique. Does he have the strength or stability to support the technique that we want? And that was the thing he didn't. So we had to work primarily on not only having a level of a body awareness so he could put himself in that technique, but understand why he can't support those positions in the technique we want. So we had to start doing that outside of the track. We have to do that in the weight room. We have to do that in the rehab section. So that was where the majority of the work was spent, right? We actually didn't really do a lot of lifting with Jason because we didn't have enough time, right? 3 months to prepare for an Olympic cycle is pretty tight window. And when the weight room is the easiest way to affect the body. Like you could change the body so quickly in the weight room. And we didn't have enough time to address a lot of weight room stuff. So we did work out. We did lift tremendously. A lot, but just not the way I would like to. I would have liked to have put it through proper phases and then actually make sure I would have calibrated his technique every time we got him stronger. We just didn't have a lot of time for that. So the most important thing is to get him to be able to get in the technique that we want. And the first thing was that hip position. The second thing was probably his head position. Jason really protrudes forward at the end of his runs, and you'll see him when he gets out of the blocks. He has one of the fastest starts in the world. In the entire Olympic runs and all the heats, he had the second fastest reaction time and the fastest start amongst all of the athletes. Zine from China had the fastest 60, and that he was in both Jason's heats. And that was very, very impressive. Like he broke, I think, one of the fastest in history. So it was the fastest Olympic run ever, which is fascinating when you see that in your same heat from somebody who could run very fast. So what we really wanted to do is make sure that he could finish it at his top end, right? So he didn't drop off. So we really have to work primarily on that. So whereas a lot of people would work only on the weaknesses, what we try to do is extend. We didn't have a lot of time for that, right? So what we try to do is extend his strength. So when you're working within a short window, both in your career or as an athlete, so it doesn't matter who you are, you got to double down on your strengths. You got to protect your weaknesses a little bit, like you guard them, but you got to double, triple down on your strength. So we would try to extend his acceleration phase and we drive that out. Whereas some athletes at 20, 30 meters, they're basically transitioning into top end.
How many meters difference was it from like what a normal, like,
Yeah, so like a normal, like again, normal elite level sprinter, right? They're probably accelerating from 40 to 60 meters. They're still accelerating, which is awesome. I wanted to take Jason all the way out to like 70. We got him out to 85, wow, which is fascinating. Wow. So he was not capping out until like 70 or 80. The longer you could drive out your acceleration phase, the highest max velocity you could reach. So that's what we were doing is we were trying to pull this out because we know that he has such a fast drop off. His deceleration happens at such a fast rate that even if we focused on it, it was going to take us a whole season to get us to that point, and we only had 3 months. So we were trying to drive that out, and then hopefully we just kind of have that speed endurance or deceleration at a shorter period. Because that's the difference, right? Like when you look at Bolt or you look at these other guys, they decelerate at a slower rate than everybody else, right? And with Jason, that was what I was trying to do, is try to drive out his acceleration so that we could, because he's going to hit this peak and then drop fast, whereas like Bolt will hit the peak slower and not as high as a peak to everybody else, but he doesn't drop. He just his 100 meters looks like this.
That's just so fascinating in the sense that like everyone's, and this is all context, and like finding out what that specific person's strengths are, what their weaknesses are. I love that. I never really thought about it like that, but it's a cool way to think of just about the sprinting. Stay in your lane, work on your strengths, work on your weaknesses, protect them.
And that's the thing, is in a short window, you have to double down on your strengths, because if you only try to focus on the weaknesses, you don't have enough time to develop that enough at the level that he's at. So we really had to focus on making sure that we could work on the acceleration. We did work on the top end in the beginning because we thought we would have enough time, but then what we realized is that affects everything else so much that we had to kind of pull it back a little bit. But this next season and go around, because we're going to go into World Indoors, I think we're going to have a chance to really develop this the right way. So it's exciting.
You referenced earlier how Jason strikes the ground and the force and the angle of which way he strikes the ground. That's why he broke the plate in the cleat or in the spike. How, like, let's talk more about angles. Let's talk about his specifically, like how he hit the ground, and then like what you would do to improve that or how you would enhance the angles. I want to hear about that for his sprint mechanics.
Yeah, so a lot of times people think it's like horizontal power coming back into the ground. And what it is your body angle moving forward and then you vertically striking the ground, but you're just propelling yourself horizontally because your angle. So it is a horizontal force. Just like a broad jump, it's a vertical force, but you're actually moving horizontally because you are at an angle. And Jason punches the ground so violently. Like if you put him on a treadmill, he could break a treadmill because he just pounds the ground hard. It just sounds violent, right? It's not soft at all. It's very, very, it's da, 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 da. Very, very violent with that foot strike. When he strikes the ground, he strikes it at the mid outside portion of the foot and then it rolls forward to the big toe. So, and it happens so fast. It's like bam, bam, and it rolls real quickly. He does that so well, and this is stuff that I didn't have to teach him. I mean, remember, he had already came to me as a high-level athlete. I didn't have to teach him any of these things. It was just how to, when you start running, you run out of alignment because you're running so fast the wheels come off. And it's our job to kind of like, how do we tighten that up? So that's what we had to do. That's why you can't get away with much at that level. So any small adjustment messes up everything. So we were basically like getting him stronger, and then all of a sudden, like he runs out of alignment so quickly. So it's like, okay, how do we bring him back? So it's like, get him faster, slow him down, get him faster, slow him down, get him faster, slow him down. And this foot striking the ground horizontally, right? Like it's coming back, like striking back into the ground at such an angle that his body's propelling himself forward and the hips start to climb. And where he has the biggest where he had the problem before he met me was his knees were just dropping once he reached max velocity. He couldn't keep his thigh height high enough to where he could strike the ground. His knees were just dipping, and then he wouldn't be able to come full cycle through because of the hip position. So once we were able to maintain the hip position, the knee was coming up. So now it's coming up, but he doesn't have enough strength to actually follow through. So then once we were able to maintain the hip position, we had to develop that hip strength to get that leg to come through.
And that was such a small range right there too, because you got his pelvis to kind of get back under him a little bit, a little more stable. But then now the knee's got that range of motion, but it doesn't have that strength or the stability in that range of motion. I love that.
Spot on. Yeah, and I think that's where you mentioned with that hip coming up, we have this now range. Technically, he's doing it, but he's running slower now.
Wow. And you're as a coach.
So
okay, as a coach, tell me that
we want.
That's like a mind game.
He's slower. So now he's like, well, why am I running slower? It's because you're running slower because you're running better technique. That doesn't make much sense, but it does. So you have to actually play with it. And Jason, I love him to death, but he's a bit of a jerk because he's so fine-tuned with his body. He'll go into a meet and be like, I could beat these guys running in the new technique that I want. So in races, he was testing stuff. So I'm like, dude, like you're in the first heat. That was before like there's the round one, there's the preliminaries, round one, semifinals, finals, right? So I'm like, please don't be an idiot and test shit at the Olympics. Like right before the last race of the season, he was testing stuff, and I'm like, dude, like you're killing me, you're stressing me out, right? But he's that fine-tuned. Like, he knows himself that well. He's like, I'll test it at the prelims. And I'm like, I'm going to kill you. Like, I want to strangle him. So, thank God he did it, and he ran really well. But it's interesting when you start thinking about at high-level athletics, these guys could actually test things out while they're running.
Right.
And because there's no way that you could build up the adrenaline in practice to run the way that you need to on race day. Like Jason and I, we call them training bullies. People that they're not gamers. They'll run better in practice than they do on race day. And, Jason ran anywhere from 9.98 this season all the way, I think he ran like a 10.4. And everyone's like, oh man, 10.4 is bad. I'm like, well, you probably just couldn't, find a lot of people running 10.4 this season. And he was trying a bunch of stuff, and he shut it down at 60 meters. So people look at these numbers, and they're like, they don't know what these numbers mean.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we're not trying to win every race. We're trying to get better.
Right.
And I think that you saw that with a lot of the American sprinters is that they beat each other up getting ready for trials. And then when they get out there to the Olympics, the strong one, Fred Curley, was able to survive because he's got such strength in preparation for his, coming out of 400. So
sure.
I think that's what was fascinating. He's a strong guy, so he's able to maintain this. That's why you saw like Jacobs. He's a super strong guy. He was able to maintain himself leading up to the finals. But at the 100 meters, you get faster the more you run. So it was unfortunate for us that we didn't have a lot of time to run on a track before the Olympics. Because of the travel restrictions, everything else. Remember, a lot of these guys came from Diamond League to come run for the Olympics. We weren't able to. We had to travel and then sit in a camp and then run 5 days before. Jeez. So, like the U.S. teams, they were able to set up an off-site camp. We didn't have the funds to be able to do that. So there's definitely advantages to other countries. But you do what you can. I don't think there's no excuse. We go out there and we run our best. But there absolutely is advantages to coming from, a country that has a lot of finances and a lot of power.
Yeah, definitely. But also cool at the same time that like you guys were, the underdogs, and and you guys get to take advantage, like you said, make the best of the situation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of benefit of that because we do our own thing. We're not pulled into a lot of the political mess, right? Because there is a lot of that, right? This in the Paralympic Games, I have an athlete that's running the 100, the 200, and the 400, and maybe the 4x1, which is fascinating. Yeah, he's as a T-37 CP, Nick Mayhew, and he's going to be in Team USA. And he was out there at the Tokuhama base at the Air Force base, so he's already been training. He's been acclimated already, and he's all set up, ready to go. Because it's from the East Coast, it's a 12-hour to 14-hour flight, and it's a 13-hour time difference ahead. So it takes a long time to get your body acclimated. Yeah. So he's already been out there since early August, acclimated, and he runs next week. So that's fascinating, but he's going to have an advantage amongst probably some of the other athletes that are competing.
So it's just you don't think about these things until you're in it, right? All right, let's talk about mechanics, and then we're good to go. So I want Coach Cav's breakdown biomechanics of the sprint, what we're looking for from the ground up, and common things we can kind of talk about. But I want to hear about your mechanical breakdown of the sprint from the start to finish.
Yeah, so I break everything up into 5 phases, right? So there's phase 1 is going to be the block action. So it's the stance, right? It's the first thing. The first step, right? The acceleration, max velocity, and then the finish. So those are your 5 phases that you break everything up in. And you could actually, even though this is going to be geared towards a linear sprint, you could break that up into any sport, because even if it's change of direction, you could break it as into the cut or out of the cut, and then it's going right to linear, right? You just break it up based upon whatever it is. So if it's a baseball player coming out of the batter's box, it's stance, it's the first step, it's the acceleration. Now, you're not going to reach max velocity. You're not going to reach speed endurance. You don't need to do that. So it's just going to be condensed down based upon the sports and the specificity of that position. But in the linear sprint, those are the 5 phases. And I assess different areas in each phase. So the way I look at it is H3F. It's an easy way to remember it. So H is head, hips, and hands. And then the F is feet. So H3F. Really, really easy to remember. So the first one is the head. We want your head position, like in the start, we want it looking down, chin tucked, in a good neutral spine, right? Hip. As you come out, right, when you're running, we do not want your head to be moving lateral, side to side. If you are moving lateral, it needs to be on the inside of your foot. If your head gets on the outside of your foot ever, you're losing you're losing the ability to load the joints that you need to load to create a good stretch reflex, right? You want to have this good plyometric effect every time you hit the ground. So you want the load to be on the inside of your head, to be on the inside of your foot, which then will drive on the inside of your knee. You can hit on the insteps and then take off. So when you get to top speed, you do not want your head protruding forward, basically going up and back like you're bobbing your head. Because every time your foot hits the ground, your head shoots forward. And if you don't have enough neck strength or core stability throughout the entire body or the entire kinetic chain, the head will push forward and then your body will slow down. So if we start to see people's heads moving up and back, that becomes a problem. In real amateur sprinters, you'll see their heads rotate side to side like they're shaking their head no. And basically that is an absolute no-no. You do not want to be shaking your head no, all right? We don't want to be shaking our head yes either, because that means we're just bouncing into the run. We want our head to be actually staying perfectly still and letting our body move, right? So that's the head. The hands, we want our hands to be open, right? In acceleration, because what you're doing is you're creating an extension in the hands, we're creating an extension in the feet, right? This extension in the feet that is created allows for stiffness, right? So if you are just listening to this podcast, if you shake someone's hand, but you do it with a limp like a limped hand or a limp wrist, there's a chance that you're going to hurt your hand. So the easiest way to prevent yourself from doing that is not to squeeze someone else's hands hard, but just to actually extend your hand when they go to squeeze it, and then you know the pressure in which you could grab. It's an easy way to protect yourself. The other thing that happens is those hands, the bones in the hands triangulate, and they create a bracing effect. It's the same thing with your foot hitting the ground. When you extend that pinky toe, the foot basically opens up, and when you strike the ground, you could roll forward and then curl your feet up underneath you. So that extension in the hand correlates to the extension in the feet. Not to mention, do we want the hands open or closed? We want the wrist to be kind of straight. We don't want the wrist to be flicking or rotating, right? The elbow, and this is all part of like the hand visualization biomechanically, is it open or closed? We want the elbow joint to be in a open position and fixed, but not locked. We don't want it to be rigid where it's like a robot running. We want it to open and close naturally, right? Like actually when your foot hits the ground, the opposite hand is fully extended straight down by your side, and then the elbow comes up and then opens back up. So there is this kind of like looping or swinging effect to it, but we just don't want to be too open or too closed. If we get too tight with it, we don't let anything else open. If we're too open with it, right, our legs have a long recovery phase. So that's the second H, which is the hands. The third H is the hips. Again, like you were referring to with Jason, is we want the hips to be in a neutral position. We want that pelvis to be up. And an easy way for anyone listening to this is drop your hips down. So if you could pretend that your hips are like a bucket and they're filled with water, we do not want the water pouring out the front. And when we run, we don't want the water to pour out the sides. We want to keep our hips stable. And as the race continues, our hips climb. They don't snap up and back. They climb out of the gate. So if you think about your hips being a bucket and your hips are neutral position, when you lift your knee's going to be able to go high up. But if water's pouring out the front of the bucket, the knee won't be able to go that high. And that's what Jason's first problem was. It's one of the things that you referred to when that hip was getting too anterior. So that's a very good visualization for anybody and someone to tell their athletes is if the water's pouring out of that bucket, we need to keep the water in the bucket because that's where our power is coming from. The F is for feet, right? How do we strike the ground? How does the foot strike the ground? The foot should strike the ground on the outside midfoot and then roll forward to the big toe and then push off. A lot of times people say that your heel should come in contact with the ground, and you will see that in sprinters when they come full, when their head moves over their foot. However, I will say that when you see that stretch shortening cycle is so long that you're losing that elasticity, and you should probably build a little bit more stiffness in the athlete, allowing them to paw back more into the ground, and that would allow for a better stride frequency, which is what you want at top speed. So collectively, H3F is the way that I will evaluate all athletes in different phases of sprinting. And then it's just a matter of in which phase, what should they be doing. In the earlier phases of sprinting, in the dry phase acceleration, their leg action should be more like a piston where it's firing, back and forth. But as it transitions into max velocity and speed endurance, so where your body's decelerating, you should be in a more elliptical cycle of those legs where it's folding underneath and then smacking back down into the ground. So these are the components that I look at, and then I just associate where they are technically based upon what phase we're working on within
Gotcha.
training. And a good indicator is if you're watching an athlete and you're watching them run and you see a technical breakdown, if you tell them and you work on it and they still can't do it, it's probably because they lack the strength to support that technique. So you're not going to be able to work on that as much when you're on the track. You need to work on that when you're in the weight room or in therapy or in some sort of other modality, because you're moving so fast to fix those things. that you have to already have the stability and strength to support those positions.
Right.
So hopefully those visualizations could help people kind of understand what I'm looking for, but then also how to correct them for the athlete and for themselves.
Totally. It was great. I loved it. And I wanted to ask one more thing about the foot. I feel like the foot is the key to a lot of the body. If the foot isn't strong, it's taking off the whole body. What do you think about that? And so,
absolutely.
What do you think
I
about
mean,
that?
if you think about it, it's the only thing that's striking the ground. If it's weak, it's going to crack, right? If the weakest link is the first thing that hits the ground, everything else is going to be a mess. But for athletes that the weakest thing is later or higher up the chain, then it's a delay.
Gotcha.
So, for instance, we talked about Jason's hip. That's not the foot, right? He didn't have any foot problems. So it's going to hit him later in the race. The higher you go up the body, the later in the race it's going to become a problem.
Interesting.
So, for instance, Jason had a hip problem and he had a neck strengthening problem. So it's going to hurt him later on in the race. If you have a foot problem or a lower leg problem or a quad or a glute problem, it's going to hurt you early on in the race.
Gotcha.
So people that can't accelerate well predominantly have foot or lower limb problems. People that don't have top end issues, have higher problems up the body.
For the people that do strike the heel, or those elite sprinters, because I wouldn't teach my young athletes to be striking the heel, but like an elite sprinter can get away with it, like you said.
I still think it's slowing them down, though.
Sure. So would you change that because, like, could that mess with their actual speed?
Absolutely. And the reason why I would change it is because at any point where there's a technical breakdown, there's an increased risk of injury. So yes, it might make that athlete slower, but it made them safer. And if you could get them faster in a safer environment, then you could get them faster when they were when there was a technical breakdown. It just takes time. And most coaches are not patient. They rush the process. They try to get people fast too soon. Where what I would prefer to do is pull back the rubber band, right? The further we pull back the rubber band, the faster the athlete's going to go. But most people are not willing to work off of that timeline. They're too greedy.
Makes sense. Last thing, man. I want you to tell everybody where they can follow you, what you offer, if there's anything you want to promote out there to the world, and also one book that you would highly recommend. I would say one because otherwise you can go nuts.
Yeah, no worries. So, a couple things. I know there's a lot of people listening to this that are in different phases of their career. So if you're an athlete, that's easy. You can just reach out to us. Instagram's the easiest place to reach me. I'm quite accessible, and the reason why is because I could get an inside look on your life or what's of interest to you. So I think that's always fascinating, right? Where, sometimes we're on email and there's so much communication that's lost. Even while John and I were doing this podcast, like we can message each other and say, hey, we need to get updated on something, or something's like there's a technical problem, whatever it may be. So Instagram's really easy. It's just Coach Cav, K-A-V. If you're an athlete and you ever have a question, you want to reach out, I'm super accessible to athletes. That's kind of like my passion and wheelhouse. If you're a coach, we have a coaches room mastermind, and it's just a bunch of high-level people at a high level, that run coaching and businesses. And it's just a great group of be-around people that, pretty much could help you all across the world. We have people everywhere, which is fascinating. If you're interested on the education side on speed, Hank Krajinoff, who I consider to be one of the greatest Olympic coaches of all time, he's been to Olympics more years than I've been alive, and that is definitely a knock on his age. It is fascinating, though, to someone like that. And I had an opportunity to join forces with one of my mentors and do a speed certification with Stronger Experts. So if you're interested in learning more and an in-depth look on speed, it's over 20 hours of high-level speed information at the Olympic level. So I believe that you should learn everything from the top down, like what is it like at the pro level to the Olympic level. The cool part about this speed cert is we did it not only for track and field, but we did it for multiple sports. So there is there is change of direction in there. There is visual stuff. There's a ton of different areas in which you could learn, and you could apply it to any type of athlete that you work with that is a speed athlete. So I think that's factor. I mean, I factored in baseball, soccer, football, boxing, like everything you can imagine that's associated with speed, we put in that cert, and it's over 20 hours of high level information between myself and Hank Krajinoff, who I consider to be one of the best coaches I've ever interacted with, and probably one of the not only an amazing person, amazing mentor, but one of the greatest human beings too that is on this planet, and it's just an honor to be associated with him. So, and that's at Stronger Experts. That's an amazing program if you want to work at like continuing education. It is also, I think, 2 fully credited CEUs. So for people that are interested in CEUs, it's a great place to get them, and a great organization also. And then, you know, on that end, I mean, I have my book. If you're an athlete, or if you want to give a gift to an athlete, Man Up, which is just the 5 areas for athletic success. It's kind of like a come to Jesus meeting. I'll be more than happy to, you know, give you that link and show that out. But it's an easy one to get on Amazon. And then for coaching, I still think that, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People is probably the #1 recommended book that I'll ever give out to anybody. I think that if you read that book, the first directions in that book is to read it twice. And I think most people won't do that. And the reason why is you're going to miss things. But it's a great lesson, right? It's like, just because you think you know it, or even if you know it, are you doing it? So let's say you read the book and you know it. When you read the book the second time, what did you apply before you move on to the next chapter? So I'm going to highly recommend that book, because I just think that it's still a fascinating read. It's timeless. Anything that is timeless, I'm a huge fan of. And that book has obviously passed the test of time for sure.
Love it. Man, Coach Kev, thank you so much, man. I love you. I appreciate your time, you taking this time to give your wisdom and share your knowledge. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Absolute pleasure. A lot of fun, too.